So I got kind of excited today when I saw this video here, David Fravor, blah, 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 with Lex Friedman. Lex Friedman was interviewing Commander David Fravor, who is famous for seeing the Tic Tac UFO and being a frequent guest on various TV shows, explaining what he saw. Now, I was excited because it said down here, 2 hours, 30 minutes, and 1 second into this nearly 4-hour video is a response to Mick West debunking, which sounds very interesting because I did a lot of debunking of these videos. Anyway, let's get into it and see what they have to say.
I have to kind of bring up some debunking stuff because I think not the actual idea, not the actual facts of the debunking, but the nature of the true believers versus the debunkers.
Well, it's great you're bringing up debunking. I'm not sure why you don't want to bring up the actual facts of the debunking. You just want to talk about the nature. But, you actually do bring up facts in a minute. So let's keep going.
Hurts my heart a little bit because people are just talking past each other. But let me kind of bring it up. Mick West. I've just recently started paying attention just in preparing to talk to you about this world. And Mick West is one of the better known people who kind of makes a career out of trying to debunk. Sort of his natural approach to all situations is that of a skeptic. I think it's very...
It's kind of true in that skeptics demand evidence for claims, but you're saying it like it's a bad thing. And my natural inclination to any kind of strange claim is to say, what is the evidence that backs this up? And how have you eliminated these other explanations? So, I don't see doing that as being a bad thing.
Very useful and powerful, especially for me coming from a scientific perspective, to take the approach he does. It's valuable, and I think no matter what, I hope that people, quote unquote, true believers are a little bit more open-minded to the work of Mick West. I think it's quite useful and brilliant work. So,
well, I'd like to thank you for that, Lex, and I appreciate it. So,
he has some explanations of the things that you've seen with the Tic Tac, like with your own eyes. Like he says that it's possible that you miscalculated the size and the distance of the thing and so on when you were flying around. I don't find that as... maybe you can comment on that.
No, let me do it right now.
Sure.
So my theory about what Commander Fravor might have seen, this is a very vague theory because I really have no idea what he might have seen, is that there was something there, wasn't moving particularly fast, and it was perhaps something like a balloon tethered, like a target that was set up for something. And he looks down and he sees this balloon wafting around, and he goes down to take a look at it, but he misjudges how far away it is because he describes it as a featureless object. I'm a big fan of Tic Tacs. I always have some Tic Tacs with me. But with a Tic Tac, you know how big it is because you know how big Tic Tacs are. Planes, you know how big a particular plane is because you know how big that particular plane is. But if you didn't know how big a plane was, like if you couldn't tell the difference between, say, a 737 and an A340, which are different sized planes, but they were some distance away, how would you know how big something was? And if you didn't even have any idea how big this craft actually was, how can you tell A, how far away it is, and B, how big it is? How do you know? How do you know? What are the actual mechanisms that allow you to say that this Tic Tac is this particular size and it's not actually a smaller Tic Tac that's further away? Well, let's see what he has to say. What mechanism does he use to determine how big things are and how far away they are?
Sure.
So, because that comes up, like how did you know it was about 40 feet long? I go, okay, so 16 years flying against other airplanes, know what stuff looks like. I've looked down on things. So if I know, I know, here's the known things. I know when we saw the Tic Tac, I was at 20,000 feet-ish, right around there. So when I look down, I know what a Hornet looks like looking down on them because I've done it for all those years. I got a good idea. So that's why I said 40 feet because it's about Hornet size. So, and as I go around, you get to the point where you have to be able to judge distance when we fly out of experience. And you can tell if something's small or big, So I would argue the fact of, pure experience. There's, professional observers, which is what we're actually trained to do. And having done it for so long, no.
Well, here's the thing. If you're a professional trained observer and you're saying that you're trained to do these things, what does your training consist of? Are there techniques that you use to actually determine how far away something is and how big it is? And if it has no features, how do you know? Is it simply purely, seat of the pants stuff? You know how far away it is. Like, sure, like if you see a hornet, you know how big a hornet is, so you know how far away it is. You see something that looks like the size of a hornet. How do you know it's not something that's twice as big as a hornet, twice as far away, or something half the size of a hornet, half the distance away? How do you know how far away it is? Well, you said you get kind of a sense after a while. Let's I can. Obviously, you've got a much better sense of where things are in space with flying around than I would. I do have some pilot training, not very much. But yeah, you don't really seem to have a specific technique, so... Anyway, this is not really that important.
It was, and everyone came back with the same thing. They're like, yeah, it was about the size of a hornet.
How often in your experience of those 16 years do you find that what you see is the incorrect state of things? So like how often do you make mistakes with vision?
So, yeah, good question. Pilots make mistakes all the time. It's, because human vision and the mental system is fragile. And Fravor will now go on to say that happens all the time, but he just said that he relies upon looking at things to see how far away they are. So
you make vision issues a lot because and the sad part is your brain believes what your eyes see. We are actually trained to do the opposite of that, especially when...
Right, so that's the training. You're trained to not go by what your eyes see, but instead go by what the instruments see. And yet you just said the reason you could tell how big it was and how far away it was and how fast it was moving was just by looking at it.
You instrument fly because your brain and eyes can tell you one thing, but you got to trust your instruments. So we get trained on all that stuff. So if you want to look at it and go, well, you're disoriented or this, I'd argue going, no, I'm not, because when I'm flying the airplane, even as I'm looking at the Tic Tac, I've got a heads-up display that tells me what my airplane's doing. Mm-hmm. So I know what I'm doing. I can look outside. I've got a sense of what I'm doing, but I'm also looking inside to cross-check of what I'm seeing is in reality.
That's kind of interesting. He's looking inside to cross-check what he's seeing. What did he see inside to cross-check about this Tic Tac? I don't think it actually showed up in any of his instruments. And also, if you're looking inside... that means you've taken your eyes off the Tic Tac. Whereas it kind of previous accounts have kind of implied that you had eyes on the entire time. So interesting. Obviously, you have to do instrument scans and look at the various things there, but you're looking inside the cockpit, not with the heads up on the inside. So there was some more stuff there about how he writes things down after he went out and how he's really good at observing things and how the training keeps him there. And then Lex starts talking about chess. So I'm just going to skip over that bit.
And so over all those years, you've gotten good. So what are the chances that your eyes betrayed you when you saw the Tic Tac? Low.
0.
Well, I'm not 0. So
okay, 90. Yeah, I am 99.9%. So 0.1%. My eyes deceive me. But remember, if it deceived me, it had to deceive the other 4 people. So the percentage is even lower.
Yeah. Okay. Well, okay. I don't find that particular.
Well, I don't really have a particular debunking for that. It's just kind of a vague theory as to what Fravor might have seen. As you know, my interest here is mostly with the videos. So let's talk about those.
The videos for the FLIR video, the Go Fast, and the gimbal video, they are only interesting to me in the context of your story. Like, without that, they're kind of low resolution. It's like it's easier to build a debunking story to be skeptical. So that's just where I'm coming from. Maybe you can convince me otherwise. But so to bring up Mick West one more time, he looks at the FLIR video and he says that one of the most amazing parts of the FLIR video, for people who haven't seen it, is at the end of it, the Tic Tac flies or appears to fly very quickly to the left
Off the screen.
off the screen. And what Mick West says is that Mick West, probably others, that the way to explain that is the tracking system. Like we said, it's vision-based tracking, simply loses the object. The tracking loses it, and so it simply allows the object to float off screen because it's no longer tracking it. So I find that at least a plausible explanation of that video. Looking at your face, you do not. So can you maybe comment to that debunking
Sure,
aspect?
I will. So
That's a good question. And I would hope that Commander David Fravor actually answers it.
it's funny how people can extrapolate stuff who've never operated the system.
No.
Well, that's a poor start, because that's just saying Mick West doesn't know anything. What is he talking about? Why is he even asking me this question? I'm just not going to listen to him. Why don't you just explain to me why I'm wrong, instead of telling me like that I don't know anything about what I'm talking about?
So I can't tell you how many times I've watched. You got to remember when we looked at this thing, when Chad came back with the video, we sat there and watched it. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I watched it off the original tapes going, all right, let's look at this. Because you can look and see where the airplane's going. You can see if it's looking left or right. And if you actually watch all that stuff, it doesn't do that. It actually, when the vehicle starts to move, the bars, the tracking gate starts to open up. And the people at Raytheon could probably add to this because they built the pod. The tracking gate will start to open up. But the thing, when it leaves so fast off the screen, the pod can't move fast enough. It has gimbal rates on how fast that thing can move around. Because there's another.
So he's saying that the speed of the object leaving the scene exceeds the gimbal rate of the camera system. I don't think that's true. And the reason I don't think it's true is that the camera is tracking at a certain rate from left to right. And it's not a very fast rate. It's a really, really, really slow rate. It's about 1 degree every quarter of a second, thereabouts. Not very fast at all. It's basically about this rate, the rate at which I'm turning my hand right now. I'm hardly moving it, but it's going about 1 degree every quarter of a second. It's hardly moving. It's hardly moving at all. And then what happens is the object leaves the scene. It leaves the scene at exactly the same angular rate as the camera was previously tracking that object. So one of two things must have happened. Either the object was being tracked at a certain slow angular rate, and it suddenly accelerated to twice that rate. So it went from going 1 degree every 4 seconds, or quarter of a degree a second, to 1 degree every 2 seconds, or about half a degree per second, which is still very, very, very slow. And you've seen these systems, they do this. Yeah, the cameras can quite easily move much faster than a half a degree a second or a quarter of a degree of a second. The other alternative is that instead of the object doubling in speed, it stayed the exact same speed and the camera speed dropped to 0. The camera stopped tracking it at a quarter of a degree per second, and the object simply left the scene at a quarter of a degree per second. You don't explain why that isn't the case.
Another theory that, the pod's looking forward. When the pod passes underneath the airplane, so if I'm looking at you and you pass underneath me, the ball will actually flip around to kind of finish off, and it'll.
This seems completely wrong to me, I'm afraid. We've seen time and again that when you pan from left to right with a forward-facing infrared, then the ball is pointing down or up. It's not exactly in the right line. Then when it gets to this point, it can't actually keep tracking from left to right. There's no way of it actually possibly doing it. It has to rotate. There has to be a gimbal correction at that point. If it's going underneath, then it doesn't so much. I think Commander Fravor here appears to be confusing the way helicopter cameras are mounted. So when a helicopter camera is mounted, it's mounted vertically. So the ball is at the end of a cylinder which rotates. So when it goes underneath. Or perhaps he's thinking about simply when the pitcher flips upside down because it would need to be corrected. So instead of it being twist it around, it just rotates it inside the camera. But it's not actually the gimbal correction rotating. What we're talking here about is the actual housing, the external housing. Because if you're pointing down, you're moving from left to right. You can't actually pan from left to right with that system. So it has to do this rotation. It's in the patents. They describe it in the patents about having to rotate around 0 degrees and the things they do to try to minimize it. So I think you'll find you're wrong about that.
It swaps ends because it has, it's a gimbal.
What does that mean, swap ends? I mean, it's pointing this way and it tracks you down, then what? Yeah, I'm just going to swap around. You can't do that because it's not mounted that way. You can only do that when it's going forward and going left to right. So it doesn't make any sense.
It can't just, it's not free floating. But there's a theory on one of them, it's here and it flipped over. It doesn't do that when it's looking out in front.
All right, so if it doesn't do that, why does it do it? Not your video, in Chad Underwood's video, you can very, 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 very clearly see the entire scene rotate when it's approximately around 0 degrees. I think it's like 3 degrees left, something like that. But it does this rotation exactly where you would expect if there's a gimbal correction rotation when the camera is facing forwards and panning up or down a little bit and then traverses the 0 degree mark. It has to do this rotation. You see it in Chad Underwood's video. So why are you saying now that it doesn't do it? Seems like you're wrong.
Front, it stays like this. So yet another debunker who doesn't know this. So,
Well, I don't know. Lots of people have agreed with me on that one, and the patents seem to agree with it, and the general mechanics of it seem to agree. So maybe I'm right.
And Mick has had several theories on some of the other videos, like one of them, the Go Fast as a Bird, and Jeremy Corbell actually did a nice job.
Thank you, Lex. That was great. Or a balloon. I wish you'd followed up on that and hammered that point home. My main theory about Go Fast is, in fact, that it is a balloon. Secondary theory, less likely, is that it's a bird. Commander David Fravor is quoting filmmaker Jeremy Corbell, who says that it couldn't be a bird because it's colder than the ocean, and if it was colder than the ocean, it would be dead. As if this is some kind of debunking of all of my videos. It's an incorrect debunking of a secondary hypothesis for one video. Birds that fly at high altitude are going to have cold exterior feathers. They're going to show up as cold on infrared. If a bird is flying at 13,000 feet, which this object I think is a balloon, this object was flying at 13,000 feet, it's going to be about 40 degrees colder than the air at sea level. So its exterior is going to be cold because it's insulated. If its exterior was hot, that would mean it'd be pumping out heat and it would die. So insulated bird will appear cold on infrared when in very cold air, especially against the ocean surface, which is 40 degrees warmer. Corbell debunked nothing there. He just threw out this straw man, and Lex knows this. Lex knows that it's a straw man and said, or a balloon, but unfortunately did not follow up and say, well, what if it was a balloon? Because Fravor's got no answer for that.
Of saying, no, it's not, because he's on black hot, so the white object is actually colder than the ocean that's flying. Well, birds aren't colder than the ocean. They'd be dead.
So
it's like he's just repeating what Jeremy Corbell told him without even thinking about it.
A gimbal video to comment on the amazing aspect of that video is the rotation, the apparent rotation of the object. That is something that is not possible to do with systems that we know of. And Mick West suggests that a flare, like reflections or whatever, can explain.
No, because what Mick...
Right, so yeah, another good question is bringing up my hypothesis for the rotation of the gimbal object, which I think is the glare of the engines, because it's infrared and it's looking at the engines of a distant jet. Very, very hot, it makes this glare, and the shape of the glare is defined by part of the camera, and part of the camera rotates, and that makes the shape of the glare rotate, not the object, not the image, just the shape of the glare rotates. And it would be great if Commander Fravor could actually address this issue, but I don't think he's going to.
What Mick West doesn't see is, so when they take, because I've talked to the one of them actually I work with, so I know him. I talk to him all the time. So, and it's his best friend actually shot the video. One of his best friends
for the gimbal video.
The gimbal video, both of them. The Go Fast and the gimbal were shot by the same person.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and they were in each other's wedding, so that's how well they know each other. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, what you don't see is, so the airplanes they're flying, still Super Hornets, but they have the APG-79, which is the new phased array radar that's made by Raytheon. Thing's incredible. Okay. It doesn't, usually if it's out there and it sees it, it's real. So at first they thought they were.
Right. Clarification here. Just because I'm saying what you see in the video is a glare, it does not mean that it is not real. Here's a flashlight. I made it like a jet engine. It's got a little tube on the end. Turn it on, you get a glare. It's from a real object, but it's a glare. This is the glare that you see. Doesn't mean it's not attached to something. It's attached to this very real object. It's not lens flare. This is lens flare over here moving around. It's this. It's just the bright area around a bright light. I'm not saying it's not real. I'm saying it's an actual jet-powered airplane out there in the distance that's just, you're looking up its tailpipe, so you're looking at the very hot engines, and so you're seeing glare. That's what the question is, but I'm not hearing any answers.
They were ghost tracks when they started seeing stuff, and then they actually threw one of the targeting pods out there. Well, the targeting pod, if there's a heat signature, and you go, hey, dot, heat signature, something's there. Yeah. It's real. It's not, you're not picking up some extraneous thing. So what you see in the gimbal video of the thing, and it rotates, and you go, holy shit, look at that thing. It's just sitting there, and it's in the wind, and it's going against the wind. Why it's doing this. Mm-hmm. You know, someone goes, oh, it's an airplane. No, if an airplane does this, it's eventually going to start to change aspect. Cause
it's not doing that. You don't even understand what the actual argument is.
It's in a turn. Mm-hmm. This thing doesn't change aspect. It just rotates.
It's just rotating.
Right. The other thing that you see when you talk to them is, so they're on their radar, there's an object that they identify as their number one priority, or their launch and steering. So when they designate that, that's where the targeting pod's going to look. That's what you get in the gimbal video. There's 5 other, I think it's 5. They're kind of in a V, you know, like a geese would fly, that are out in front of it, and they're actually coming. They're out in front of it, and they actually turn on the radar and go the other way while they're filming the gimbal video. Mm-hmm. You know, if you take it in context, because you go, oh, it's just the video. Well, if you take the video with the radar going, no, there's actually other things out there, because there's at least 60 people that have seen the.
Oh. My explanation of the video doesn't change if there's other things out there. It's still, why is it rotating? It's rotating because it's the glare and part of the camera's rotating, which makes the glare rotate. Sure, maybe there were other things flying around. We don't see them on the video. Apparently they were on the radar, but how close were they? Were they some other planes? You know, were they miles away or were they right next to it? He said they were going in the other direction. All I have to look at is the video. I'm trying to explain what I see on the video. The fact that there's something else that's not on the video doesn't change what's actually on the video.
In 70 knots of wind and stay in the same location. They had an airplane because there was 2. There's the gimbal thing. That's a pretty big object. Mm-hmm. There's also, they talk about, it looks like a cube that's inside of a sphere.
A translucent sphere. What the hell is that?
And
so I've heard.
See, now we're just getting onto something completely different. This was supposed to be the response to Mick West debunking segment, and it's nothing to do with that. Fravor was asked about, why does it rotate? What do you think of Mick West's glare rotation explanation? Obviously, he's never heard of it. Obviously, if he has heard of it, he has no understanding of it. Based on his repetition of Jeremy Corbell's cold bird debunking nonsense, I don't really think he has much interest in these theories, which is unfortunate. Understandable, of course. He doesn't think very much of me because I'm just some guy who's got very little flying experience and doesn't know what he's talking about. But you've been asked about these theories for a long time. People keep bringing them up, and they're not going to go away. And just changing the subject whenever they're coming up, answering the wrong questions again and again, isn't really going to make these hypotheses go away. So if you think I'm wrong, could you actually look at what I'm actually saying and then explain why I'm wrong? This is very, very disappointing. I thought David Fravor, maybe disagreed with me, and I thought he would have good reasons for disagreeing with me, and it would be great if he could have explained why he disagreed with me. Now, my hypothesis about what he saw is not a very well-formed hypothesis, and I certainly wouldn't put any money on it. But his explanation for why it was wrong was basically, I have lots of training and I know what I saw, and people make mistakes all the time, so they should trust in their instruments. But I saw this with my own eyes, so I can't be wrong because I've been doing it for so long, even though I normally trust in my instruments. His response to why the object lost lock at the end was just, it's going too fast, it's going faster than the camera can turn. But that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Like 0.25 seconds per degree is not very, very fast. It's very, very slow. And saying that the gimbal doesn't rotate when it goes past 0 degrees is also wrong. It's just plain wrong. He seems to be confusing it with helicopter-mounted gimbals. The Go Fast debunking video, the Go Fast hypothesis I put forward of being a balloon, thank you, Lex. He just says, well, Mick West says it's a balloon, but it can't have been a bird because birds would be dead if they're colder than the ocean, which is nonsense in itself, but he's just ignored the balloon hypothesis. And gimbal, Alex says, Mick West says it's a rotating glare. And he says, well, it can't be because there were 5 other things off to the side. Makes no sense whatsoever. Why couldn't it be a rotating glare of something and there were 5 things off to the side? You say how amazing it is that it was rotating. A normal plane couldn't just rotate and hover there like that. Well, yeah, that's because it's not actually rotating, and that's what the entire hypothesis is about. It's about explaining why it is rotating and why it is apparently rotating. So this has been very disappointing. Very, very disappointing. And frankly, though, I don't expect it to change very much. I don't think I would love to be proven wrong, David. If you could find some time perhaps to talk to me about it, that would be great. I would be very happy to do so, and we could actually focus on what I see as the actual issues with the video. And you can tell me I'm stupid to my face if you want, and you can explain why I'm stupid. But here you haven't done that. You've called me stupid, but you haven't explained why I'm stupid. You haven't explained what I actually got wrong. You just flat said it was wrong, but mostly you just explained something else, like the bird would be dead when I'm talking about balloons. Or it can't be a glare because there were 5 different objects on the radar. Anyway, disappointing, but let's see where we go from here.